Hello everyone, Skippy here, and welcome to One Piece episode 951, directed by Satoshi Ito and supervised by Masayuki Takagi. With a preview that houses tons of great direction from Satoshi Ito using great lighting and atmospheric storyboarding to his advantage, along with what could be Masayuki Takagi's strongest showing of art so far in this arc, episode 951 looks to be following up with the fantastic standard of quality set by last week's episode in all the right ways. I'm a tiny bit skeptical of if it can overthrow last week's efforts despite how solid it looks otherwise, but with tiny droplets of content extensions seen throughout the preview that will only serve to make yet another transitionary episode tons more interesting, on top of the fact that animators like Sonda and more are giving Zoro a lot of animation love this episode, my most minuscule worry should be hand-waved away fairly soon. So will episode 951 be yet another incredible gift like last week was? Let's debate pirates versus ninjas like the old days and find out. This episode covers the remaining 4 pages of chapter 950 and the first 7 pages of chapter 951, and it kind of follows the same type of MO that last episode did when it comes to enriching the source. On top of just Ito's lovely atmosphere that takes pride in having certain scenes be all but silent, there's quite a bit of added filler as we're more than used to at this point, that includes a comedic scene with Luffy's mummy poisoning and actual combat between Zoro and the Oniwabanshu ninjas that are chasing after him, which helps pad out the rest of the episode in the best of ways, with it all being enjoyable in its own right along with filling in the blanks, alongside allowing the canon dialogue between all the involved characters to flow as naturally as it should, so it doesn't feel like one hell of a slog. When stitched together with the rearranging of Law's interrogation to after Beppo has the flashback, with both events feeling more impactful than their manga counterparts due to more time being spent on them, we end up being delivered yet another grade A example of how the recent 12-page method of adaptation can make for an enjoyable experience when it comes down to it. If I had one complaint, I'd say that I wish the flashback to Law and Hawkins' conversation from episode 943 was cut down a bit, since it is time that could have gone to making other scenes even better. But it's just a mere nitpick for what is another solid showing of the definition of adaptation. It's almost as if we've grabbed a bag of Skittles this week after mowing down on a whole bowl of them last episode, as Satoshi Ito brings along his own brand of using color to strengthen his storyboard that focuses on using whites and blues more than anything else, but yet still ends up being just as effective in the long run to make scenes that are important plot-wise massively eye-catching. He may not have the grandest sense of scale when compared to some of the other directors on the show, but what the board lacks in that area it makes up for with surprising depth of field and crazy immersive lighting that works in tandem with the atmospheric sound effects that build the mood of certain scenes through Ito's direction. While I would have liked if some shots were a bit less up close and perhaps a tad bit more dynamic to really sell what some compositions were going for, Ito's storyboard here continues that upward trend of his that started with 937 and works more than well for the plot that we're being treated to. Combine that with Masayuki Takagi's corrections being more or less just as extreme and polished as I expected them to be, plus the surprisingly well done Zoro action by Sonda that feels as visceral and ruthless as the manga's conclusion of it made it seem, episode 951 may not usurp what last week laid out on the table, but it's still pretty damn good in its own right. While I still think I prefer 937 all things considered, and this episode certainly had some slight imperfections despite of everything that it did right, but I still had a pretty good old time with Ito and Takagi's efforts here that I really didn't have with it in the manga. As far as next week's episode 952 is concerned though, I'm a bit mixed. While Katsumi Tokoro's board was solid, if not a bit vintage last time, I'm slightly worried about how he'll portray such important content like this given that he's known for being inconsistent and under-delivering on bigger moments. Served with a side of anxiety in form of Shingaki being the supervisor, I'm a little scared for how such a major plot-based episode like this will turn out, especially after the last few weeks had such crazy good episodes with better staff to boot, but we'll of course need to wait and see. Anyways guys, it's it for now. I'm Skippy, and God, I wish that were me.